Sarah found out her grandmother died the same way everyone else did, through Instagram. Except everyone else had been there. They'd said their goodbyes. They'd held her hand. They'd been invited. Sarah wasn't. And when she demanded to know why, her mother said 6 words that shattered her entire world, because she wasn't really your grandmother. It was 12:47 p.m. on a Tuesday when Sarah Martinez's entire life changed. She was sitting in her office in Seattle, halfway through a turkey sandwich, mindlessly scrolling through Instagram during her lunch break. The accounting firm where she worked as a senior analyst was quiet that afternoon. Most of her coworkers were at an off-site meeting she'd skipped to catch up on quarterly reports. Her thumb paused mid-scroll. The post was from her cousin Jessica. The image showed at least 20 people crowded around a hospital bed. Sarah recognized every face: her mother Barbara, her father David, her older sister Emily with her husband and kids, her younger brother Jake, aunts, uncles, cousins, 3 generations of the Martinez family, all gathered in what was clearly a hospice room. In the center of the photo, barely visible beneath the crowd, was Grandma Rose. Her eyes were closed. Her hand was being held by Barbara, Sarah's mother. Everyone was smiling through tears, that particular expression people wear when they're trying to be brave during something devastating. The caption made Sarah's sandwich turn to ash in her mouth. Said our goodbyes to Grandma today. She passed peacefully surrounded by everyone who loved her. Heaven gained an angel. Thank you for raising us with so much love and strength. We'll miss you forever. Dub Broken Heart # Family First # Rest in Peace # Grandma Rose # Forever in Our Hearts. Sarah stared at the screen. Read the caption again. Looked at the photo again. Counted the faces. 23 people. Everyone was there. Everyone except her. Her hand started shaking. The sandwich fell onto her desk, forgotten. She zoomed in on the photo, searching for some sign that she'd simply missed herself in the crowd, that somehow she'd been there and just didn't remember, a ridiculous thought, but her brain was scrambling for any explanation that made sense. But no. She wasn't there. Because she hadn't been told. Grandma Rose, the woman who had raised Sarah during her parents' messy divorce when she was 10, who had taught her to bake bread and told her stories about the old country, who had called her Mija and made her feel special even when the rest of the family made her feel invisible, had died yesterday. And no one had told her. Sarah looked at the timestamp on the post. Posted 6 hours ago. Which meant Rose had died yesterday, probably early evening. It was now Tuesday afternoon. Almost 24 hours had passed, and Sarah's phone had not rung once. With trembling fingers, she checked her call log. Nothing. No missed calls. No voicemails. No texts. She opened the family group chat, the one titled Martinez Squad 2 Hearts, and scrolled through recent messages. The last message was from 3 months ago. From her. A photo of a sunset she'd seen while hiking, with the caption missing you all. Hope everyone's doing well. No one had responded. She'd assumed the chat had just gone quiet. Families did that sometimes, conversations would die down, people got busy, life moved on. She hadn't thought much of it. But now, looking at Jessica's Instagram post with its dozens of comments from family members she'd assumed were just too busy to respond to her messages, Sarah realized something horrifying. The chat hadn't gone quiet. She'd been removed. They'd made a new one without her. Sarah's coworker, Jennifer, walked past her cubicle and paused. Hey, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Sarah couldn't speak. She just turned her phone around and showed Jennifer the Instagram post. Jennifer leaned in, squinted at the screen, then looked at Sarah with confusion. Is that your family? Yes. And that's your grandmother who died? Yes. Were you there? No. Why not? That was the question, wasn't it? I don't know, Sarah whispered. No one told me. Jennifer's face shifted from confusion to horror. Wait, what? They didn't tell you your own grandmother died? Apparently not. Sarah, that's insane. That has to be a mistake. Maybe they thought someone else called you? Sarah wanted to believe that. She desperately wanted to believe this was just a terrible miscommunication, that her mother had assumed her father had called, that everyone had assumed someone else had handled it. But deep in her gut, she knew better. Sarah stepped out of the office and into the parking garage, her phone already pressed to her ear. Her mother's number rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. "Hi, you've reached Barbara Martinez. I can't come to the phone right now, but please leave a message and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. God bless." The sound of her mother's cheerful voice made Sarah want to scream. "Mom, it's Sarah. I just saw Jessica's Instagram post. Call me back. Now." She hung up and immediately dialed her sister Emily. Straight to voicemail. She tried her brother Jake. Voicemail. She tried her father David. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Sarah." His voice was flat, careful. The voice of someone who'd been expecting this call and had prepared for it. "Dad." Sarah's voice cracked. "Grandma Rose died?" Silence. Then, "Yes. Yesterday evening. And no one thought to tell me?" "Sarah. I found out on Instagram, Dad." "Instagram. Like I'm some random person who follows the family page. I'm her granddaughter." "I know, sweetheart. I know. And I'm sorry you found out that way. Why didn't anyone call me? Why wasn't I there?" Another pause. "Too long. Too waited. We thought it was for the best." Sarah felt like she'd been punched. For the best? What does that mean? She was my grandmother. I had a right to say goodbye. It's complicated. Then uncomplicate it. Explain to me how my entire family decided I shouldn't know my grandmother was dying. Sarah, please. Your mother is very fragile right now. She's devastated. This has been incredibly hard on her. Hard on her? What about me? What about what's hard on me? I understand you're upset. I'm not upset, Dad. I'm destroyed. You all erased me from the most important moment of Grandma's life. Of my life. Do you understand that? David sighed. It was the sigh of a man who'd been through this conversation in his head 100 times and still didn't have a good answer. Your mother and I, we made a decision as a family. Grandma Rose wanted it this way. That's a lie. Sarah's voice was cold now. Grandma would never want me excluded. She loved me. She did love you. Very much. But there are things you don't understand. Then help me understand. Sarah, please. Don't make this harder than it already is. We're planning the funeral. It's going to be this Saturday at St. Catherine's. We can talk about all of this then. In person. I want to talk about it now. I can't. I have to go. Your mother needs me. Dad, wait. The line went dead. Sarah stood in the concrete parking garage, phone still pressed to her ear, breathing hard. Around her, cars pulled in and out, people went about their normal Tuesday afternoon, completely unaware that her entire world was crumbling. She tried her mother again. Voicemail. She tried Emily again. Voicemail. She tried her Aunt Linda, her mother's older sister. Linda answered. Sarah. Aunt Linda, did you know? Did you know they weren't going to tell me about Grandma? A pause. Honey, yes. I knew. At least she was honest. Why? It wasn't my decision to make. Your mother asked us all to respect her wishes. Her wishes? What about my wishes? What about Grandma's wishes? Sarah, I can't get in the middle of this. This is between you and your mother. Everyone keeps saying that. But you're all complicit. You all stood there at her bedside, knowing I wasn't there, knowing I hadn't been told, and you said nothing. We thought we were protecting you. From what? From saying goodbye to someone I loved? Linda's voice softened. From pain, sweetheart. From complications. Your mother was trying to spare you. Spare me? She devastated me. I know it doesn't feel that way now. But maybe when you understand the full situation, you'll see why she made the choice she did. What situation? What are you talking about? That's not my story to tell. You need to talk to your mother. I'm trying. She won't answer. Give her time. She's grieving. So am I. I'm grieving someone I never got to say goodbye to because my entire family decided I didn't deserve that. Linda was quiet for a long moment. Then, Sarah, if you're planning to come to the funeral, maybe prepare yourself. There are going to be things said. Things revealed. It might be difficult for you to hear. Sarah's stomach dropped. What does that mean? Just, be prepared. That's all I can say. Aunt Linda. I'm sorry, honey. I have to go. I'll see you Saturday. She hung up. Sarah sat down on the curb of the parking garage, her professional blazer getting dirty against the concrete, and put her head in her hands. Something was very, very wrong. This wasn't just about a missed phone call or a miscommunication. This was deliberate. Coordinated. Everyone knew. Everyone had agreed. She'd been erased from her grandmother's death. On purpose. But why? That night, Sarah sat in her small Seattle apartment with her laptop open, glass of wine in hand, and began a deep dive through her family's social media that would haunt her for weeks. She started with Jessica's Instagram. Scrolled back through months of posts. There, 2 months ago. A family dinner. Everyone around a long table at what looked like a restaurant. Caption: Family time is the best time. So grateful for these people, red heart. Sarah wasn't in the photo. She hadn't been invited. 1 month ago. A post from her brother Jake showing a group at Topgolf. Caption: Martinez family tournament. May the best cousin win person golfing. Sarah wasn't there. 3 weeks ago. A photo from her sister Emily showing Grandma Rose in a wheelchair at what looked like a park. Caption: Took Grandma to the botanical gardens today. She loved the roses. Rose hashtag named after flowers hashtag Grandma Rose. Sarah hadn't known they'd taken her. No one had asked if she wanted to come. She moved to her mother's Facebook. Barbara wasn't a frequent poster, but when she did post, it was usually family updates. 4 months ago, so blessed to have all my children and grandchildren together for Sunday dinner. Family is everything. Folded hands. The photo showed Emily, Jake, their spouses, and their kids. Sarah was in Seattle. She assumed she simply couldn't be there because of distance. But now she wondered, had she even been invited? She checked the comments. Dozens of responses from extended family and friends. Beautiful family. You raised them right, Barb. Family goals. One comment from a family friend: Is Sarah still in Seattle? We miss seeing her. Barbara's response: Yes, she's very busy with work. We don't see her much anymore. The phrasing stung. We don't see her much made it sound like Sarah's choice. Like she was the one pulling away. Sarah opened her text thread with her mother. Scrolled back through months of messages. Most were from Sarah. Photos of her life in Seattle. Updates about work. Questions about the family. How's Grandma doing? Tell everyone I said hi. Miss you all. Barbara's responses were sparse. One-word answers. Good. Fine. Will do. Sarah had assumed her mother was just busy. Bad at texting. Distracted by caring for Grandma Rose, who'd been declining for months. Now she saw it differently. Her mother hadn't been busy. She'd been distant. Deliberately. Sarah opened her email and searched for Rose Martinez. She found what she was looking for, emails from the hospice facility where Grandma had been living for the past 3 months. The first email, from August: Dear family members of Rose Martinez, this email is to confirm that Rose has been admitted to Peaceful Transitions hospice care. Visiting hours are 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. daily. Please contact us with any questions. Sarah had called the facility the day she got that email. She'd spoken to a nurse who told her, kindly but firmly, the family has requested limited visitors at this time. I'll note that you called, and someone will be in touch. No one ever was. Sarah had called again 2 weeks later. Same response: the family has requested limited visitors. She'd assumed they were protecting Grandma from being overwhelmed. She'd respected it, even though it hurt. Now she understood, they weren't protecting Grandma from being overwhelmed. They were protecting Grandma from Sarah. But why? What had she done? Sarah stood up, paced her small living room, wine glass still in hand. She mentally catalogued the last few years of her relationship with her family. She'd moved to Seattle 5 years ago for a job opportunity, a significant promotion she couldn't turn down. Her family had been, not supportive, exactly, but not opposed. Her mother had said, if that's what you want, in a tone that suggested disappointment but acceptance. She came home for Christmas every year. Usually Thanksgiving too, unless work prevented it. She called her mother every few weeks. She sent birthday cards to her nieces and nephews. She contributed to family gift funds for weddings and graduations. She wasn't perfect, but she tried. She stayed connected. Or at least, she thought she did. But looking back now, she could see the pattern, her family gradually pulling away. Group texts she wasn't included in. Family events she wasn't told about. Phone calls that went unreturned. She'd told herself it was normal. Families drifted. People got busy. But it wasn't drift. It was deliberate distance. And it had culminated in this, her grandmother dying surrounded by family while Sarah sat in Seattle, completely unaware. At 11:47 p.m., unable to sleep, Sarah checked her email one more time. There was a new message from an unfamiliar address, rosestory247@gmail.com. The subject line: You deserve to know the truth about Rose. Sarah's hand hovered over the mouse. This could be spam. Could be a scam. Could be someone from the family trying to mess with her. But something told her to open it. The email had no text in the body. Just a single attachment, a PDF labeled Birth Certificate, Sarah Elena Martinez. Sarah clicked it open. The document loaded slowly, line by line, like a reveal in a horror movie. At the top, State of California, Certificate of Live Birth. Child's name, Sarah Elena Martinez. Date of birth, March 15, 1989. Place of birth, St. Mary's Hospital, Los Angeles. And then the line that stopped Sarah's heart. Mother's name, Rose Catherine Martinez. Father's name, unknown. Sarah stared at the screen. Read it again. Read it a third time. This had to be fake. A photoshopped document. Someone's cruel idea of a joke. But the official seal looked real. The signature looked real. The format was exactly right for a California birth certificate from 1989. Mother, Rose Catherine Martinez. Rose wasn't her grandmother. Rose was her mother. Sarah's hands went numb. The laptop slipped slightly on her lap. She grabbed it, steadied it, zoomed in on the document. Mother, Rose Catherine Martinez. The woman she'd called Grandma her entire life had given birth to her. Which meant Barbara, the woman she'd called Mom for 35 years, wasn't her mother at all. Barbara was her grandmother. Or, her sister? No, that didn't make sense either. Sarah's brain couldn't process the family tree. Nothing made sense. She Googled Rose Martinez birth records Los Angeles 1989. Nothing came up publicly. Birth records were usually sealed unless you had authorization. She tried Rose Martinez teen pregnancy 1989. Still nothing. She tried Barbara Martinez miscarriage 1988. There, a hit. An archived newspaper announcement from a small community newsletter in Pasadena, dated November 1988. Barbara and David Martinez sadly announced the loss of their expected child. The family requests privacy during this difficult time. In lieu of flowers, donations may be made to St. Catherine's Church. Barbara had a miscarriage in November 1988. Sarah was born in March 1989. 4 months apart. The timeline clicked into place like a lock turning. Rose, who would have been 16 in 1989, got pregnant. Barbara, who was 25 and had just lost a baby, took Rose's baby and raised her as her own. Sarah wasn't Barbara's daughter. She was Rose's daughter. Raised by her own grandmother as her mother, while her actual mother became grandma. The family had been living a lie for 35 years. And Sarah had been the lie. Sarah didn't sleep that night. She sat on her couch, laptop open, scrolling through every photo album she had, every family video, every memory, looking at them through this new, horrifying lens. Her first birthday party. Rose was there, smiling, holding baby Sarah while Barbara cut the cake. Her kindergarten graduation. Rose in the front row, crying happy tears while Barbara took photos. Her middle school choir concert. Rose mouthing the words to the songs while Barbara chatted with other parents. Her high school prom. Rose fixing Sarah's corsage while Barbara complained that the dress was too short. Her college graduation. Rose in a wheelchair by then, she'd had a stroke 2 years earlier, reaching up to touch Sarah's face while Barbara posed for photos with Sarah in her cap and gown. Every major moment of Sarah's life, Rose had been there. Not as a grandmother. As a mother who couldn't claim her daughter. And Barbara had let it happen. Had maintained the charade. Had stolen Rose's motherhood and made Sarah believe it was love. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from Maya, her best friend in Seattle. Hey, just checking in. Haven't heard from you since lunch. You okay? Sarah stared at the text. How could she possibly explain this? She typed, my grandmother died and no one told me. Then I found out she wasn't actually my grandmother. She was my mother. My whole life is a lie. Other than that, great. She deleted it. Typed instead, family stuff. Can we talk tomorrow? Maya responded immediately, of course. I'm here whenever you need. Love you. Sarah set the phone down and looked at the birth certificate still glowing on her laptop screen. Mother, Rose Catherine Martinez. She thought about every Sunday phone call with Rose. The one she'd maintained religiously, even after moving to Seattle. Every week without fail, she'd call Rose at the hospice facility. They'd talk about Sarah's week, about the weather, about nothing important and everything important. Until 3 months ago, when the facility started saying Rose couldn't take calls anymore. She's declining, the nurse had said. The family thinks it's best if she rests. The family. Barbara. The woman who'd stolen Rose's daughter and made sure Rose could never tell the truth. Sarah wondered, had Rose wanted to tell her? In those final months, when she knew she was dying, had she tried? The email. The birth certificate. Someone had sent it to her. Rose wouldn't have had access to email in hospice. But someone in the family did. Someone wanted Sarah to know the truth. The next morning, Sarah called in sick to work, booked a flight to Los Angeles, and threw a suitcase together with shaking hands. Her boss, Michael, called her personally. Sarah, Jennifer told me about your grandmother. Take all the time you need. We'll cover your accounts. Thank you, Sarah managed. And Sarah? I'm so sorry for your loss. Sarah almost laughed. She didn't know what she'd lost yet. A grandmother? A mother? Her entire identity? Thank you, she said again, and hung up. She texted her family group chat, the one she hadn't realized she'd been removed from. She had to recreate it from scratch, manually adding everyone's numbers. The message, "I'm coming to the funeral. We need to talk." No one responded. At the airport, sitting at her gate, Sarah Googled finding out your parent lied about your birth. Hundreds of results. Support groups. Therapy recommendations. Articles about NPE, not parent expected. Stories from people who'd discovered through DNA tests or deathbed confessions that they weren't who they thought they were. Sarah read testimonies from people who'd found out at 40, at 50, at 60 that their father wasn't their biological father, that their mother had lied, that their sibling was actually their parent. One woman wrote, "I found out at my mother's funeral that she was actually my grandmother. My sister was my biological mother. The entire family knew except me. I felt like the universe's cruelest joke." Sarah understood exactly how she felt. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Sarah, it's Marcus. Your cousin. I heard you're coming to the funeral. I'm glad. This whole thing is fucked up and someone needed to tell you the truth. I'm sorry it happened this way. Let's talk when you get here. Marcus." Her mother's nephew, Barbara's sister Linda's son. He was a year older than Sarah, and they'd been close as kids. They'd lost touch when Sarah moved to Seattle, but he'd always been one of the good ones. Sarah texted back, "Did you send me the birth certificate?" 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. No. But I know who did. We'll talk in person. It's complicated. Everything was complicated. Sarah boarded the plane. Found her seat. Stared out the window as Seattle disappeared beneath the clouds. She was flying home to confront a family who'd lied to her for 35 years, to attend the funeral of a woman who was her mother but couldn't say it, to demand answers from people who clearly didn't want to give them. And she had no idea what she was going to say when she got there. Sarah landed in Los Angeles at 6:32 p.m. on Thursday. The funeral was Saturday. She had less than 48 hours to prepare for whatever was coming. She checked into a Holiday Inn near Pasadena, close enough to be accessible, far enough that she wouldn't run into family at the hotel bar. At 8 p.m., Marcus texted, "I'm at the hotel bar. Come down when you're ready." Sarah changed out of her travel clothes, washed her face, and went downstairs. Marcus was sitting in a corner booth, nursing a beer. He stood when he saw her, and for a moment they just looked at each other. Then he pulled her into a hug. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. I'm so fucking sorry." Sarah let herself be held for 5 seconds before pulling away. She couldn't afford to break down yet. They sat. Sarah ordered a glass of wine. The bartender brought it quickly. "How much do you know?" Sarah asked. "Enough," Marcus said. "My mom told me years ago when she was drunk at Christmas. I thought it was just gossip. Then I started paying attention. The way your mom acted around Rose. The way Rose looked at you. It made sense." "Did everyone know? The older generation?" "Yeah. They've always known." "People our age?" "Most of us suspected, but no one talked about it. It was the family's biggest secret." "Why? Why hide it?" Marcus sighed. "Because it was the 80s. Rose was 16. Unmarried. Pregnant. Her parents, your great-grandparents, were super religious, super strict. They were humiliated. Barbara had just had a miscarriage, and she couldn't have kids naturally after that. So they made a deal. A deal. Barbara takes the baby. Raises you as hers. Rose goes away to boarding school for a year, really a home for unwed mothers. When she comes back, you're Barbara's daughter. Problem solved. Everyone saves face." Sarah felt bile rise in her throat. "I was a problem to be solved." "No. You were a baby caught in the middle of a fucked up situation." Rose didn't want to give you up. But she was 16 and had no power. Barbara wanted a baby desperately. Your grandparents wanted to avoid scandal. So you became Barbara's daughter. And Rose just accepted it? What choice did she have? She was a kid. And honestly, I think part of her thought it was better for you. Barbara could give you stability. A father. A normal life. Rose stayed in your life as grandma so she could still be close to you. Sarah's hands were shaking. She watched me grow up calling someone else mom. How did she stand it? I don't know. But she loved you, Sarah. That was real. Everything about how she treated you was real. Sarah wiped her eyes. Who's my father? Marcus hesitated. His name was Marcus too. Different guy, same name. He was 19, Rose was 16. When she told him she was pregnant, his family moved out of state. They paid Rose's family money to keep quiet and stay away. Do you know where he is now? He died. 5 years ago. Car accident. I looked him up after my mom told me the story. So Sarah's biological father was dead. She'd never get to meet him, never get to ask him why he abandoned Rose, never get answers. Does he have other family? A son. Your half-brother. His name's Daniel. He lives in San Diego. I found him on Facebook. I don't know if he knows about you. Sarah absorbed this. She had a brother. A stranger who shared her DNA. Did Rose want me at her deathbed? Sarah asked quietly. Marcus looked away. Yeah. She asked for you. Multiple times in those last few weeks. She wanted to tell you the truth before she died. Your mom, Barbara, wouldn't allow it. Why not? Because she was terrified you'd reject her. Terrified you'd choose Rose over her. She spent 35 years being your mother, and she couldn't stand the thought of losing that. So she made sure Rose died without being able to tell me the truth. Made sure I never got to say goodbye as her daughter. Yeah. Marcus's voice was thick. That's exactly what she did. Sarah finished her wine in one long swallow. I hate her, she said simply. I don't blame you. They sat in silence for a moment. Who sent me the birth certificate? Sarah finally asked. Marcus looked uncomfortable. I can't tell you that. But they did it because they thought you deserved to know before the funeral. They didn't want you blindsided. Too late for that. I know. Sarah signaled the bartender for another glass of wine. What happens at the funeral? She asked. What do you mean? Your mom told me to prepare myself. Said things would be revealed. What is she talking about? Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Your mom is planning to tell the truth during her eulogy. She's going to publicly acknowledge that Rose was your biological mother. Sarah's blood went cold. She's going to out the secret at the funeral? She feels guilty. She wants to make amends. She thinks confessing publicly will somehow absolve her. It won't. It'll humiliate me. It'll make Rose's death about Barbara's guilt instead of about Rose's life. I agree. But I don't think anyone can stop her. Sarah laughed bitterly. Of course not. Barbara gets to control the narrative even now. She gets to decide when the truth comes out, how it comes out, and who it benefits. She's stolen my entire identity, and now she's going to expose it in front of 200 people at a funeral. Sarah. I need to go. I need to think. She stood. Marcus stood with her. For what it's worth, he said, I think you have every right to be furious. And I'll have your back, whatever you decide to do. Thanks, Marcus. One more thing. He pulled something out of his jacket pocket. A small cardboard box. Rose asked me to hold on to this for you. She gave it to me 2 months ago and said, if anything happens to me, make sure Sarah gets this. I think she knew she was dying and wanted you to have it. Sarah took the box. It was light. What is it? I don't know. She didn't tell me. But it's yours. Sarah nodded, clutching the box. Thank you. She went back to her room, sat on the bed, and opened the box. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. All addressed to Sarah. All unsealed, dated over 35 years, from the year Sarah was born to 3 months ago. Rose had written to her daughter for her entire life. And never sent a single letter. Sarah pulled out the first one, dated March 20th, 1989, 5 days after Sarah was born. My dearest baby girl. They took you from me today. Your grandmother says this is for the best. That you'll have a better life with Barbara. That I'm too young to be a mother. Maybe she's right. But holding you for those 3 days in the hospital, I've never felt more certain of anything. You are mine, and I am yours. I will watch you grow. I will be in your life, even if I can't tell you who I really am. I will love you with everything I have. Forever. Your mother, Rose. Sarah read letter after letter. Rose chronicling Sarah's childhood, her achievements, her struggles. Rose writing about how hard it was to pretend to be the grandmother when she wanted to be the mother. Rose writing about Barbara's jealousy, the family's pressure to stay silent, her own guilt and grief. And the final letter, dated 2 weeks before Rose's death. My dearest Sarah. I'm dying, and the biggest regret of my life is that I never got to tell you the truth. You are my daughter. You were never a mistake. You were love, young, foolish, beautiful love, and I have watched you grow into the most incredible woman. Barbara raised you well, but I gave you life. I hope someday you'll forgive me for not fighting harder to tell you. I hope you know that every time I looked at you, I saw the best part of myself. I love you. I have always loved you. I will always love you. I wanted to tell you before I died. I begged Barbara to let me. She refused. She said it would destroy you, destroy the family, destroy everything we've built. So I stay silent, even now. But I'm giving these letters to Marcus. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. And I hope, wherever you are, you can forgive me. Forgive all of us. You deserved better than this, Mija. Mom. Sarah collapsed on the bed, the letters scattered around her, and wept until she couldn't breathe. Sarah woke up on Friday morning with Rose's letters spread across the hotel bed like fallen leaves. She'd fallen asleep reading them, trying to piece together a mother she'd never known she had. Her phone showed 6:47 a.m. and 17 missed calls, 10 from her mother Barbara, 4 from her sister Emily, 3 from her father David. There were also 12 text messages. Barbara, Sarah, please call me. We need to talk before tomorrow. Barbara, I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But please let me explain. Barbara, Marcus told me about the letters. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. Emily, Mom is losing it. What did you say to her? Can you please just call her back? Emily, Sarah, this is ridiculous. You're making everything worse. The funeral is tomorrow. Can we please just get through this like adults? David, sweetheart, your mother is beside herself. I know you're hurting, but she's hurting too. Please call her. Please. Sarah deleted every message without responding. She ordered room service, coffee and toast she wouldn't eat, and sat at the small desk, staring at her laptop. She pulled up a blank document and started typing. She needed to organize her thoughts. Needed to understand what she was feeling before she faced them all tomorrow. The document became a list. Things I know. Rose was my biological mother. She was 16 when she had me. Barbara is my biological grandmother, but she raised me as her daughter. Emily and Jake are not my siblings, they're my niece and nephew. My biological father was named Marcus, and he's dead. I have a half-brother named Daniel who probably doesn't know I exist. The entire extended family knew this secret my entire life. Rose wanted to tell me the truth before she died. Barbara prevented it. I was deliberately excluded from Rose's deathbed because they were protecting the secret. Barbara plans to confess everything publicly at the funeral tomorrow. Things I feel. Betrayed. Lied to. Erased. Stolen from. Angry. Devastated. Confused about who I even am anymore. Robbed of ever knowing Rose as my mother. What I want. Answers. An apology that actually acknowledges the harm done. To scream at all of them. To never see any of them again. To somehow go back in time and have Rose tell me herself. To understand why they thought this was acceptable. Sarah stared at the list. It didn't make her feel better, but at least her chaos was organized now. Her phone rang. Marcus. She answered. Hey. Hey. How are you holding up? I'm not. Fair. Listen, I wanted to give you a heads up. Your mom called my mom last night, hysterical. She knows you have the letters. She's panicking about what you're going to do at the funeral. What I'm going to do. She's the one planning a public confession. I know. I told my mom that. She's trying to convince Barbara to keep the eulogy private, but I don't think it's working. Barbara is in full guilt spiral mode. Sarah laughed bitterly. Of course she is. She gets to be the martyr. She gets to confess and be praised for her honesty while I'm just, what? The secret that got out? You're not a secret, Sarah. You're a person who got screwed over by people who should have protected you. Thank you for saying that. It's the truth. Marcus paused. What are you going to do tomorrow? I don't know yet. Part of me wants to stand up during her eulogy and call her out in front of everyone. Part of me wants to just leave and never come back. Part of me wants to burn the whole thing down. All valid options. What would you do? Marcus was quiet for a moment. Honestly? I'd tell the truth. Not her truth, your truth. What this felt like from your side. How they stole your identity and your relationship with Rose. They've controlled the narrative your whole life. Tomorrow, you take it back. Sarah felt something shift in her chest. You're right. I am? Yeah. I'm not going to sit there quietly while Barbara makes this about her guilt and her journey and her pain. Rose deserves better than that. I deserve better than that. What are you going to do? I'm going to write a eulogy. For my mother. And I'm going to read it whether Barbara likes it or not. At 2 p.m. on Friday afternoon, Sarah was sitting in the hotel restaurant working on her eulogy when her sister Emily appeared at her table. We need to talk, Emily said, not asking permission as she slid into the booth across from Sarah. Sarah closed her laptop. Hello to you too. Don't do that passive-aggressive thing. You've been ignoring all of us, and Mom is falling apart. Good. Emily's eyes flashed. Good? Sarah, she's destroyed. She's barely sleeping. She's crying constantly. The funeral is tomorrow, and she can barely function. That sounds like her problem. It's a family problem. We're all suffering because you decided to blow everything up. Sarah leaned forward, voice dangerously quiet. I blew everything up? Emily, I found out 3 days ago that my entire life was a lie. That the woman I called Grandma was actually my mother. That you're not my sister, you're my niece. That everyone I've ever loved has been lying to me since the day I was born. And you think I'm the one who blew things up? Emily faltered. That's not. I mean, yes, it's complicated, but it's not complicated. It's betrayal. Clear, simple, calculated betrayal that lasted 35 years. Mom was trying to protect you. From what? From knowing who I am? From having a relationship with my actual mother? What exactly was she protecting me from, Emily? From the shame. From people judging you. From knowing you were. Say it. From knowing I was what? Emily looked away. Born out of wedlock. To a teenage mother. People would have looked at you differently. So instead, you all looked at me like a project. Like a problem that got solved. Like a baby who needed a better mother than the one who birthed her. That's not fair. None of this is fair. Sarah's voice rose, and other diners turned to look. She lowered it. Do you have any idea what this feels like? To find out at 35 that everything you believed about yourself was fabricated? That your mother wasn't your mother? That your grandmother, who you loved more than almost anyone, died without ever being able to tell you she was your mom? Emily's face crumpled. I know it's horrible. I can't imagine what you're going through. But Mom didn't do this to hurt you. She did it because she loved you. Love doesn't lie, Emily. Love doesn't steal someone's identity. Love doesn't keep a mother from her daughter for 35 years. She gave you a good life. She raised you, loved you, provided for you. And I'm grateful for that. Truly. But that doesn't erase what she took from me. And from Rose. Emily wiped her eyes. So what now? You're just going to destroy Mom publicly? Make her look like a monster in front of everyone? I'm going to tell the truth. The truth will ruin her. The truth ruined me. Turnabout seems fair. Emily stood up. You've changed. You used to be kind. Forgiving. I used to be lied to, Sarah said coldly. Now I'm informed. Funny how that changes things. Emily walked away without another word. Sarah opened her laptop back up and kept writing. That evening, Sarah's father David knocked on her hotel room door. She considered not answering. But something about the gentle, hesitant knock made her open it. David stood in the hallway looking 10 years older than the last time she'd seen him. His eyes were red-rimmed, his shoulders slumped. Can I come in? He asked quietly. Sarah stepped aside. He sat in the chair by the window. Sarah sat on the bed. The distance between them felt appropriate. I'm not here to defend your mother, David started. I'm here to explain my part in this. Your part? I knew from the beginning. Barbara told me the truth before we got married. She said Rose was her younger sister who got pregnant at 16, and she was going to adopt the baby as her own. She asked if I was okay with it. I said yes. Sarah stared at him. You knew before I was even born. Yes. And you never thought, at any point in 35 years, that maybe I should know too? David looked down at his hands. I thought about it constantly. Especially when you got older. When you graduated high school, when you turned 18, when you got married, every milestone, I thought, this is the time. We should tell her now. But Barbara was terrified you'd reject her. And I was a coward. I didn't want to hurt either of you. So you let me live a lie instead. Yes. And I'm sorry. Sorrier than I can ever express. Sarah felt tears welling up. Are you even my father? Biologically? No. Your biological father was a boy named Marcus who left before you were born. But Sarah, David's voice broke. I have been your father in every way that matters. I changed your diapers. I taught you to ride a bike. I stayed up with you when you had nightmares. I walked you down the aisle at your wedding. I have loved you as my daughter since the day you were born. That's real. That part isn't a lie. But it's built on one. I know. And I don't expect you to forgive me. But I need you to know, you are my daughter. Not because of biology, but because of choice. I chose you then, and I choose you now. Sarah wiped her eyes. Then why didn't you fight for me? Why didn't you tell Barbara that keeping this secret was wrong? Because I was weak. Because I loved Barbara and didn't want to lose her. Because I convinced myself that the lie was protecting you when really it was just protecting our family's image. I failed you, Sarah. And I'm deeply, profoundly sorry. They sat in silence. Are you going to come to the funeral tomorrow? David finally asked. Yes. What are you going to do? I'm going to speak. David nodded slowly. Good. Rose deserves to have her story told by someone who loved her. And you deserve to tell your side. Barbara won't like it. Barbara made her choices. Now she has to live with the consequences. Just like the rest of us. David stood to leave, then paused at the door. I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But please don't let this destroy you. Don't let their mistakes define the rest of your life. You're stronger than all of us combined. You always have been. He left. Sarah sat on the bed and cried for the father who had loved her despite everything, and for the family that could have been if anyone had been brave enough to tell the truth. Sarah spent Friday night writing and rewriting her eulogy for Rose. She started with anger, a scorched earth speech that exposed every lie, every betrayal, every person who'd stayed silent. She deleted it. She tried grief, a weeping tribute to the mother she'd never known, the relationship stolen from them both. Too raw. She tried forgiveness, a speech about understanding why they'd made the choices they did, about moving forward. It felt dishonest. Finally, at 2 a.m., she wrote from truth. Not anger, not grief, not forgiveness, just honest, painful truth. She titled it, For My Mother, Rose. The document sat on her laptop, 800 words of everything she needed to say. She read it aloud to the empty hotel room, practicing where she'd pause, where her voice might break. When she finished, she felt something she hadn't felt in days, ready. Saturday morning arrived cold and gray. Sarah dressed in black, a simple dress, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back. She looked like she was going to a funeral. She felt like she was going to war. St. Catherine's Church was packed. Apparently Rose Martinez had been beloved in the community, decades of church volunteering, charity work, friendly conversations at the grocery store. People loved Grandma Rose. They had no idea who she really was. Sarah arrived 15 minutes before the service started. She saw her family clustered near the front, Barbara in black, crying into a tissue while Emily rubbed her back. Jake stood off to the side, uncomfortable in a suit. David saw Sarah enter and gave her a small, sad nod. Marcus appeared at Sarah's elbow. You ready? No. But I'm doing it anyway. That's the spirit. They found seats in the middle, close enough to be visible, far enough to avoid immediate confrontation. The service began. The priest gave opening remarks about Rose's life, born in 1972, raised in Pasadena, active in the church, beloved grandmother, devoted mother to Barbara. Every word twisted the knife. Then came the eulogies. Barbara was first. She walked to the podium with shaking hands and began to speak. My mother, Rose Martinez, was the strongest woman I've ever known. She sacrificed so much for this family. She gave up her youth, her dreams, her own happiness to make sure we had better lives. And there's something you all need to know. Sarah's stomach clenched. Here it came. The public confession. The martyrdom. Barbara took a deep breath. Rose was more than just my mother. She was. Barbara broke down crying, unable to continue. Emily rushed to the podium to support her. The church watched in uncomfortable silence. She was everything to us, Barbara finally managed. And I will miss her every day for the rest of my life. She walked back to her seat without finishing. Without telling the truth. Sarah realized, Barbara had chickened out. She'd built up the courage, then lost it at the last second. The secret would remain secret. Unless Sarah spoke. Several other people gave eulogies, cousins, church friends, longtime neighbors. All of them spoke about Grandma Rose and her kindness, her strength, her love for her family. None of them knew her. When the priest asked if anyone else wanted to speak, Sarah stood. The church went silent. Barbara's head snapped up, eyes wide with panic. Sarah walked to the podium. Sarah stood at the podium, looking out at 200 faces, family, friends, strangers who thought they knew Rose Martinez. She gripped the edges of the podium and began. My name is Sarah Martinez. Most of you know me as Rose's granddaughter. But 3 days ago, I found out the truth. Rose wasn't my grandmother. She was my mother. Gasps rippled through the church. Barbara made a noise like she'd been punched. Emily looked horrified. David closed his eyes. Sarah kept going. I didn't know this until after she died. I wasn't at her deathbed because my family, the people who knew the truth, decided I shouldn't be there. They decided it was easier to let her die without me than to tell me who she really was. Her voice was steady. Calm. She'd practiced this. Rose was 16 years old when she had me. From what I've learned, she wanted to keep me. But her family decided it was shameful. Scandalous. So they gave me to her older daughter, Barbara, to raise as her own. And Rose became grandma. That was the deal. People were whispering. Barbara was crying openly. Some family members looked furious. Others looked mortified. For 35 years, Rose lived with this secret. She watched me grow up calling someone else mom. She came to my birthdays, my graduations, my wedding, not as my mother, but as my grandmother. And she never got to tell me the truth. Sarah's voice cracked slightly. She steadied herself. I found letters she wrote to me. Dozens of them, spanning my entire life. Letters she never sent because my family forbade it. In her final letter, written 2 weeks before she died, she told me she'd begged to tell me the truth. She was denied. She died protecting a secret she never wanted to keep. Sarah looked directly at Barbara. I don't know if I can forgive the people who made that choice for her. Who made it for me. But I know this, Rose deserves to be remembered as who she really was. Not just a grandmother. Not just a devoted mother to Barbara. But as my mother. A woman who loved me her entire life and never got to say it out loud. Tears were streaming down Sarah's face now, but her voice remained strong. Rose, wherever you are, I want you to know, I know now. I know you're my mom. I know you loved me. I know you wanted to tell me. And I forgive you for not being able to. I wish we'd had more time. I wish I'd known sooner. I wish I could have said goodbye as your daughter instead of your granddaughter. But I'm saying it now, I love you, Mom. And I'm sorry I never got to call you that while you were alive. She folded her paper and walked back to her seat. The church was dead silent. Then, slowly, someone started clapping. It was Marcus. Then Daniel, a man Sarah hadn't met yet but somehow knew was her half-brother, stood and joined him. Then others followed, people who didn't know the family politics, who just heard a daughter honoring her mother. Barbara sat frozen, face buried in her hands. Sarah had told the truth. The secret was out. And there was no taking it back.